Yeah, the Buckeyes are back at it on the field after a bye week. Marshall's in town at Ohio Stadium for conference game number 3 and then Big Ten play. Welcome into Buckeyes Live, everyone, here at the Voice of College Football, Wednesday, 11 a.m. Eastern Time. This is your place to be for Ohio State football talk with, of course, the very best. Tony Gerdeman right next to me, BuckeyeHuddle.com. The Buckeye Weekly podcast as well comes your way every day in season. Steve Hillwagon, Bucknuts 247 Sports, of course. Guys, how we doing today?
Doing great.
All right.
Doing well. Just watched a 20-minute version of Marshall and Virginia Tech on YouTube, and I'm all set.
We can compare notes on that because I watched the first half and then I really didn't watch much of the second half, but I saw some things there as well that were kind of cool. So yeah, we can, as we get into this, if we want to talk Marshall just a little bit, we can do that.
The Thundering Herd. Interesting football history they have there for a lot of different reasons. They may want to make a movie out of that. All right, folks. Here we go. Yes.
My buddy's a West Virginia fan, and, this is like Ohio State clowning Cincinnati when he gets all hopped up about Marshall. And they played West Virginia one time, and they came up short at like the 2-yard line on like the last play. They had to get a touchdown to beat West Virginia. And I'm with him in his basement, and he stands up, starts screaming, "Who are you now? Who are you now?" And I'm like, God, this is Marshall. Why do you care? They're not even in your league. I mean, what? Why? You play them like 4. You have like a 3, and for a while the legislature was going to make them play them, and then they agreed. Well, yeah, you could play 3 games at West Virginia and 1 at Marshall, and I'm like, dude, it's like Ohio State, Cincinnati. It's like they're not even, Ohio State and Bowling Green. It's like it's not even in your league. What? Why do you care? And he's like standing up, screaming in his basement, "Who are you now? Who are you now?" Like they just beat Pittsburgh or Texas or Oklahoma, for God's sake.
Steve, I'm guessing that was either the 2010 game that was a 24-21 finish or the 1911 game, which was 17-15. Those are the only 2 games that have been one-score games in the history. 12-0 all-time record.
Might have been 2010. I don't know, but maybe they missed the field goal. I don't know, but it was like the last play of the game they lose, and he's just giving them hell with both barrels. I'm like, dude, it's Marshall. It's like your AAA affiliate. Hey, come on, man.
I mean, we can't be saying that. 20 years ago, we all know where we were watching Mike Nugent drill a 55-yarder.
Things got a little hinky
for that great 2004 team. Good times. The Heisman candidate, Mike Nugent, at that point.
That's right.
Yes, as Tony points out, and he's always quicker in the trigger than I am to get to these sites, but 12 consecutive wins for West Virginia, 12-0 series lead, all played in prehistoric times until a 1997 game, and that was a Randy Moss, Chad Pennington team, because I remember they played Ole Miss in the Motor City Bowl, I believe the first ever. And then you've got the run from 2006 through 12, where they played every year in West Virginia again. Swept Marshall. I thought Marshall might have snuck in a win here, but they did not. So,
yep, 9-0 all time according to Joey Foster here.
12-0.
Yeah. Those Pennington and Moss teams were pretty fun to watch because they would even show them on like ESPN2 or ESPNU here and there.
Yeah,
Randy Moss.
Yeah, and of course the Byron Leftwich. I mean where they're carrying him down the field. That was crazy. How can a guy who you have to pick up and carry down the field remain in the game to play? But that was nuts.
I think it was that team. It was a Leftwich team that played the highest scoring bowl game of all time, at least at that point, like 64-61 in the GMAC Bowl down in Mobile, Alabama. All right. Good stuff. We veer off. All right. We might as well stay with Marshall since we're there. And the observations that you guys came up with from this football program that went 9-4 last year, and of course, authored a Notre Dame victory a couple years ago in South Bend.
Beat Virginia Tech last year, but lost to them this year. My God, I'm looking at the line. Ohio State's favored 39.5 points. Oh my word! Yeesh. Tony, go ahead with your observations, and then I'll throw in a nugget or two.
Well, I think the thing that struck me most in watching that is it was a 17-14 game in late into the third quarter, and in Virginia Tech was winning, and they also had a punt return touchdown to give them their 17 points. So I think this is a Marshall team that is going to attack, and they'll try to throw it around. Virginia Tech is not a good offense and not a great defense, so I don't know how much stock to put in it, but I think this will be the best team Ohio State has faced. But I don't foresee any issues from anything that I saw. They'll, Marshall will blitz, but there are also going to be big lanes to run through and to capitalize on that as long as they pick up the blitzes as well as they've done. So I think Ohio State will have pretty solid day of it offensively, and Marshall's pretty wishy-washy in terms of completing passes. They might throw a ton, but they're not going to complete a ton.
Yeah. What I find interesting is, I always, revert back to my training, which is the Phil Steele book to answer all questions. It's very interesting that the guy that they selected to start against Virginia Tech at quarterback, a character by the name of Stone Earl, who is a 6 foot, 211-pound senior from Keller, Texas. Let's just see. He was previously at North Texas, and prior to that at ACU, which I think is Abilene Christian, it looks to me. Didn't play a whole lot at North Texas and comes to Marshall. And as I said, I pull out my Phil Steele, and I'm like, Stone Earl, what does he have to say about Stone Earl? The words Stone and Earl are not findable on any of these two pages referencing Marshall. Stone Earl, I'd have to look at the North Texas page probably on the statistics from last year to find out, anything about Stone Earl. So, this is one of those cases where with the transfer portal and everything else, you're like, I'm sure they're going back and looking at North Texas tape, to see what Stone Earl can do as a quarterback. He didn't do a whole heck of a lot against Virginia Tech. And yet they do have a running back who's got a pair of 100-yard games so far, A.J. Turner, albeit in the first two games against Stony Brook, who they beat, I think, 45-3, and then Virginia Tech, who they lost to 31-14. I don't think their offense is very good. Let's just cut right to the chase. I just don't see a whole lot there. They're not going to be able to establish the run like they have against Ohio State, and I don't see this character named Stone Earl accomplishing a whole lot throwing the football against Ohio State. I think Stone Earl is going to get planted a couple times in the turf there at Ohio Stadium. But what I do like about Marshall was their defense, and they got some studs, even some guys that could be draftable commodities. Number 15, Michael Green already has 3.5 sacks, I think, in 2 games. A defensive end, 6'4", 238, a speed rusher. And again, Ohio State in the past has taken speed rushers like this and just kind of swallowed them up with their size. I mean, imagine him, trying to get around Josh Simmons. He's better pack a lunch type thing. So I think they've got some guys in the front 7 who can play. Takazi Legs or I don't know how you pronounce this. Tyquay's Legs, I don't know, at defensive tackle. He's pretty good. And Landon Watson at linebacker. Those 3 guys, I think, are all players that could play for a lot of Power 4 schools. I don't know that they would come in and play right away at Ohio State. But, I look at the stats. I look at, what they've done. And I did watch the first 2.5 quarters of that game against Virginia Tech until it put me about to sleep. And, Virginia Tech, there's a reason why they're not out of the out of the gate real strong. So, they're not all that great either. So, yeah, I'm interested to see. It's a step up in class, certainly from Akron and Western Michigan, and we'll point them a little bit closer toward Big Ten play and at Michigan State next week. Obviously, Michigan State has a tough road game this week at Boston College. If Michigan State negotiates that, then you'd say, well, Michigan State's quasi-legitimate, because they would have road wins at Maryland and Boston College, who are, again, middle of the road, 6, 7, 8 win teams typically. So that would be, a sign that Jonathan Smith is kind of getting things going there at Michigan State and a caution for next week. But first things first, and we will see how the Buckeyes fare on Saturday at home against Marshall.
I do think it's telling that Marshall's facing about 50 rushes per game. So it's the offenses have been able to keep the ball moving against them. And Stone Earl will run the ball. He's a mobile guy, and he's part of their running package. So that's something Ohio State's defense will have to focus in on. And the one receiver there, I think it was Fitzpatrick or Fitzgerald, had a ridiculous Christian Fitzpatrick had a ridiculous one-handed grab against Virginia Tech. So he's got some skill, but overall, I think Steve said 39 and a half points was the line or something like that. That's a lot of points, but Ohio State's defense right now is outscoring their opponents. So we'll see if that continues.
Yeah, I'm kind of thinking something in the lines of 48-14, which would be, or 48-13, I think was what I was kind of thinking. And that's only 35 points, but, that's still a solid win. I know fans want them to always win and cover the spread and not give up any touchdowns. This is a stat that I quasi know, and I put it in our first look column. Ohio State has started the season with 2 games where they have not given up an offensive touchdown. And they have not, to my knowledge, had a series of games where they have not given up a defensive touchdown in 3 straight games since the 1973 season. It was 3 Big Ten games in a row where they gave up, did not give up an offensive touchdown. So again, take that with a grain of salt. My bleary eyes kind of, going through all those lines of scores. You say, oh, there's a 13. That one can't be it, after 2 zeros. And you're like, well, I better check that for a defensive touchdown. And, then you're like, oh, drats, it's not that one. So, I checked as much of it as I could, but I think it's back to 1973, which is 51 years since they've had 3 games in a row where they haven't given up a defensive touchdown. And it could happen this week because I don't know how good or an offensive touchdown. I don't know how good Marshall's offense is. And again, this is a byproduct of how terrible, absolutely terrible, the first 2 teams Ohio State's played this year.
The Ohio State defense, the only team in the nation not to allow an opponent into the red zone so far this year.
There you go.
So I would expect that to end, but that's just indicative of, as Ryan Day has said, the standard is the standard regardless of the opponent. So they're doing what they're supposed to be doing against bad teams, and we'll see if that continues.
Then it's off to Michigan State, correct? That's on
Yes.
the road?
Yep.
At Michigan
Off to East
State.
Lansing, who's surprising some
On
people.
Peacock.
Oh, one of those. Okay.
And that's got everybody all up in arms. As soon as it came out, see, they give us a little 20-minute notice when these announcements are coming. So I was armed and ready. And so we put the story about it up on our site that it's on Peacock. And I go, you can miss me with I am not getting Peacock, messages that I will not pay. I'm paying for this and I'm paying for that. I can't operate the television. I can't get to an app, all of that, up in arms that everybody's had about the streaming games. And I'm like, this is like, the burn notice message where he's got the thief's money out on the bridge with the flamethrower and he's about ready to flamethrow the guy's money. And the guy says, I'm going to track you down. I am going to stab you because I know you're going to stab me. You're going to shoot me. You're going to kill me. We know. you don't want the games on streaming. Too bad the games are on streaming. And the money that you're getting, your school is getting for putting these games on streaming, that's how they're able to buy Jack Sawyer, JT Tuimoloau, Caleb Downs, Will Howard to come back and play for your team. So just figure your subscription to Peacock is a donation to keep the best players in Scarlet and Gray.
But then you also have Tennessee adding a 10% surcharge to tickets from now on to
Have
also
you no shame?
help pay for that talent. So you can either look, Buckeye fans, you can either give your money to Peacock or Tennessee. Those are your
Pay
only
me
two
now
options.
or pay me later. You're going to pay me. So that's just the way
like,
it is. You're addicted to the sport, and it's just, consider yourself like a Premier League fan where you're on a different streaming or satellite service every week, and good luck finding it. And yes, it's a $10 charge. So there you go.
Well, I mean, for people like my mother who does not have the internet, doesn't want doesn't want the expense of Wi-Fi. Like, that's not just a $5 charge to be able to watch the game. And I'm sure she's not alone in that. But this is also not the first year that this has been done. This is something you either have to accept or buy into, literally and figuratively. And if it's just one game, at least it's always going to be, I would say a lesser game, but it's a Big Ten road game against an opponent who is undefeated right now. So,
the bar. This is the second year for this. The bars have it now, so they know they have to pay for it. So
we'll get back to the Buckeyes, but our buddy Yakov is taking us in a northern direction here. Mike John O'Korn, Nick Sheridan, Tate Forcier walk through that door.
I can remember when Forcier got him out to like a 4-0 start, and people are talking Heisman for Forcier. Heisman for Forcier, Is it fair?
The quarterback situation right now at Michigan is as bad as it was in 2008, Rich Rodriguez's first year with Nick Sheridan and Stephen Threet. I think the O'Korn and the Shea Pattersons and that Wilton Spate stretches, like that's still better than it is now. And we'll see what Alex Orji can do this week, because Michigan has been completely afraid to throw the ball with him because they've seen him throw the ball in practice, and the little that they've let him throw the ball in games gives you all the reason, all of the evidence that you need, all the proof that you need. And so I'm interested to see what this looks like, because this is going to be the offense that they didn't want to go with this season. That's why they went with Davis Warren. They didn't want to have to resort to this, and now they're going to. And now they have to pretend that this is what they want, and this is a good thing. And so we'll see. Alex Orji still has yet to complete a pass beyond the line of scrimmage in his career. So his first one, the next one will be the first one. He's going to have to do it, clearly. And I think Michigan fans will come to realize that if the defense knows whether you're running or passing, it makes it a lot easier to stop that run or pass. And they've been in denial about that for about a year now, in terms of knowing whether a team is just going to run or throw is not any kind of advantage. I think we've seen this past week or this season when they've complained about the predictability of the offense when Alex Orji is in there. Like, Alex Orji's in there, everybody knows it's going to be a run. That makes it almost impossible to run. It's like, really? You're so close to understanding what people have been saying for the past year.
How ironic. Did Jim Harbaugh forget to leave some notes when he left? Maybe that somebody wasn't evaluating Alex Orji. This guy's been on campus for a few years. Was nobody taking any notes, since he wasn't the starting quarterback, that he can't throw? If anyone's paying attention to the 2s and 3s over here, he can't throw. So we'll need to go get somebody else.
He's like the Martin Short synchronized swimming skit from with Harry Shearer on Saturday Night Live. They're great synchronized swimmers, but Martin Short has to reveal that I'm not a strong swimmer. I can't swim. So that's Alex Orji.
Jacket on.
Yeah, with the life jacket on. I'm not a strong thrower. I can't throw. So, yeah. Oh, well.
I mean, they're going to have to design some things that make it easier for him and try to do the screen game, get Colston Loveland back healthy, and sounds like it's not as bad. His injury is not as bad as they thought. Some play actions, but then when you're doing all of that, he still has to be accurate throwing the ball, and he hasn't been. And so this is going to have to be something that he's going to have to do something he's not yet done in a very big game against what we think is a pretty decent defense at this point against USC. And it won't just be USC. It's games after that as well. It's not like this is just a 1-game season that Michigan can just, run the ball, because if you're just trying to run the ball, defenses will continue to bring safeties up. And we saw it against Arkansas State. There are times where Arkansas State's safeties were 7 yards off the line of scrimmage. They were just breathing down the back of the linebackers because there are no concerns about being beaten downfield either against Davis Warren or Alex Orji. So Michigan's offense is going to have to execute and then hope that everything else clicks into place as well. And that's a lot of hoping, a lot of praying, and coming down with some 50-50 balls that you don't have the receivers that can do that either. So the odds are pretty much stacked against them right now. And I don't think it would be any better if Jim Harbaugh was still there, because the pieces are still the pieces. And the receivers are the receivers, the running backs are the running backs, and running backs aren't bad. Khalil Mullings is pretty good. Donovan Edwards is what he is. But Jim Harbaugh is not changing any of that, in my opinion.
Would Jim Harbaugh have gone to the transfer portal, though?
The portal was closed by the time he decided he was going to stick around, though. So
and nobody moved in the spring.
Yeah, I mean, that's one where you're going to have to go find somebody, and you can. I mean, I'm sure there was somebody out there that they could have not tampered with, but if he's sticking around and there's word out there that they're looking for a quarterback, then agents are going to tell their guys. So I'm sure they could have done something better than this. And the fact that they didn't anyway is very odd. And that's, to me, more of a program thing in terms of it's not just Sharon Moore, it's the administration as well. Like, where's the aggression in this? And, I remember writing it after Jim Harbaugh left, that Michigan just won a national title without a heavy usage of the NIL. So then their money lenders are going to assume that they can just do that every year, and you can't. And they went into this offseason without, well, we don't need to spend. We spent last year and we're fine. And they're finding out that they're not fine. And in fact, they might be quite bad.
Worse than I anticipated. And it looks like this USC team is another version of Texas in regards to quarterback play, skill position players. Don't have the offensive line that Texas does, but still another version of Texas. So if Michigan's coaching staff knows its profession, then they should be able to self-scout. They should be able to look at what happened against Texas and be able to improve. They should be able to. I'm talking more on the defensive side, because that's what surprised me more than anything, was that in addition to inaccurately evaluating their own quarterback room, that the defense was dragged around the field from the first drive on, that it wasn't a slow wear down, that, okay, our defense was a match for the Texas offense, but then we wore down in the fourth quarter.
I think I'll just say this real quick. The Texas game went exactly how it should have, how it looked like it was going to after seeing Michigan open the season. And so at what point, what have we seen from Michigan or USC right now to think that this game is not going to go in a similar way with Lincoln Riley's offense just moving the ball around and wearing out, not just wearing out Michigan's defense, but also hitting some big shots that maybe Texas did?
Yeah, I agree. I think I picked Texas to win by 10, and I think USC is favored by 5.5. I would pick USC to win by 10 this week, like 30-20, something like that was what I was looking at. And it may take a defensive touchdown for Michigan to get 20. So, and that's not out of the realm given, some of the dudes they have on that side. But, Moss to me feels like he's legitimate. given what he did against LSU. You can't gain a whole lot or figure out a whole lot based off who they play Utah State in week 2. Does that sound right?
Yep.
And they think they shut them out. So, I fully believe USC will win the game and cover the 5.5. I don't have any doubt in my mind that they're going to win the game and cover the 5.5, and it's not enough. And I don't know. People are living off last year or something with this Michigan. They don't seem to have it. So, maybe they'll surprise us, but I think it was interesting that Davis Warren set a record last week. He threw 14 passes and none of them ever touched the ground. So that's like a new NCAA record or something. Now, 3 of them did end up in the hands of opponents, but still to not have one throw out of whatever it was, 13 or 14, and none of them at any point touched the ground. That is incredible.
I mean, is it surprising? And I don't know how much we need to talk, if this is the Michigan show, it's so be it. But like, when you complete 11 of 14 passes for, 120 or 130 yards, whatever it was, but you throw 3 interceptions, 2 of them pretty bad. The other is not as bad, but still bad. Is that enough to get benched, or is it just, it's not just this one game though. It's the 3 games of 6 interceptions now. And to me, when you watch it, this was as good as it was going to get, in my opinion, in terms of, I don't see Davis Warren, even with more experience, being any better, any more capable of stretching the field. And again, it's not just him, it's the receivers, it's the offensive line. And so then you have to go with a different plan of attack. You have to go with somebody else who can better handle the lack of offensive line and the lack of receivers, and really just lean into the running game. And I think it's going to be a slog, and they're going to have to shorten the game, snap the ball with 3 seconds on the play clock, try to limit possessions. And now I remember the first title of the Michigan Monday this season was Rich Man's Iowa, and I think you got to dial down that income bracket with this Michigan team at this point. This might be, I don't want to say poor man's Iowa, but check to check, week to week, Iowa.
It's a fun comparison to make. We will check in on Iowa's offense here from week to week. Yes, I think they're somewhere in the 50s right now in total offense.
Iowa's coming up in a couple weeks too. So, this really has stacked up great for Iowa State. They played, in terms of what you'd say 1 to 10, the opponents are, they played a 1 in Akron, and they played a 3 in Western Michigan. Now they're playing a 4 in Marshall. Next week is potentially a 5-6 with Michigan State. The following week is like a 6.5 or a 7 with Iowa. And then you have a 9 with Oregon the following week. So it's like a stair step. It has gotten tougher each week going, toward Michigan State, Iowa, and Oregon. So, and then you get another week off. So, and, to really reconnoiter and get healthy and get ready for playing 7 games in 7 weeks, and then 3 more playoff games.
There it is. It's simple.
It's simple.
Easy formula. Just check them off one by one.
Just follow Steve's plan, and you can't possibly go wrong.
Steve,
I've got a quick topic. ESPN's got a great story out there about Tennessee, Oklahoma, and how Josh Heupel is leading Tennessee back to play his alma mater. He helped them win the national championship as a player in 2000, and then was on the staff with Stoops for a good long time. And finally, you get elevated to the level of your incompetence, and that's what happened to him. In 2014, they had just a terrible, miserable season, and Stoops offed him. One of the great legends in Oklahoma history, Heupel, got offed in 2014 and kind of had to go back and restart, as a football coach, and, winds up at Tennessee. Didn't he have the undefeated season at Central Florida? And then ends up at Tennessee, and now he's leading Tennessee into play his alma mater, and of course Venables was involved in all this as well because he was on the staff when Heupel was a player at Oklahoma. So they did a great job. They talked to everybody involved about, Heupel was a player. Heupel was there when they had Heisman winners at quarterback. He was the quarterback's coach. Didn't Jason White win the Heisman Trophy with him there as the quarterback's coach? And maybe Sam Bradford, was really good there as well. And then he got risen up too far up the ranks, and for whatever reason, it didn't work out in 2014. And Stoops said it was the worst day of his time as the Oklahoma coach, that he had to fire Heupel, and now he gets his revenge, because I think Tennessee could go in there and maybe lay one down on them. But we'll see. I'm not convinced Oklahoma and Venables is made for the long haul in the SEC, but we'll see.
I'm predicting by the end of that game, the Oklahoma crowd will be chanting, "We want Josh."
Yes.
As Tennessee reigns in another touchdown on a 3 or 4 touchdown victory over Oklahoma, because on one hand, Josh Heupel's not going to want to just destroy his alma mater because he loves them. On the other hand, as Steve said, they did fire him. I'm sure he would love that job if it was offered to him one day. But also, you've just got to continue to impress the playoff committee, and a big road win in the SEC. There's nothing more impressive. The second most impressive thing behind a road win in the SEC is a road loss in the SEC. And then if you can beat somebody from outside of your conference, that's great. But this is an opportunity for them to really, really impress everybody. And, they're going to be pushing Ohio State in the AP and in the coaches poll with a win after this one, I think.
Yeah. Tennessee -7 on the road at Oklahoma. So the experts are thinking like 32-25 Tennessee to win this game. So I believe that they could cover that and win by double digits. I do believe. I mean, Oklahoma struggled to beat a bad Houston team like 16-12, something like that. So I'm just hinky on Venables. I just again, great defensive coordinator, rose to the level of his incompetence now as a head coach. And, I just don't know that he's got it to be the head coach.
Well, and then with how great was he once people kind of started to not let him steal signs, when they were like Ryan Day holding up, whatever they did to keep him from stealing signs, he looked a little more human after that.
Yeah, those last couple trips to the postseason were pretty brutal with Joe Burrow and Justin Fields on the other side. A lot of points scored in those 2 games against Venables. Yeah, I'm not quite that quick to jump on Tennessee from that standpoint to that degree. But to be a touchdown favorite on the road at a place like Oklahoma is pretty substantial. Now, they did bounce back and look better against Tulane this past week, although that was nip and tuck in the fourth quarter before they pulled away.
Yep, Tulane's a good team, obviously, based off last year. The great breakthrough season that they had.
I just think it's cool we're finally getting into the now the conference slates of all of the new conferences, including the Big Ten, USC and Michigan playing. USC with their first Big Ten game, and we saw UCLA welcomed into the Big Ten last week so graciously by Indiana, as Indiana does. Hazing is bad. I don't believe you should haze, but the Big Ten hazed UCLA by having Indiana go in there and just dunk them in the toilet and give them a wedgie and then post it all on social media for everybody to see.
How about, I was at Winking Lizard when that game came on last Saturday at like 7:30, and the first shot of the Rose Bowl was empty. I mean, you had those red seats that are faded into whatever color. It looks like it's USC Stadium with how faded those seats are at the Rose Bowl. And it really didn't. It filled up between the 20s a little bit. They had a season high 50,000 people there. They'll never draw another crowd like that. the rest of the season unless they have one of the marquee teams coming through there. I don't know what their schedule is, but UCLA football dead in the water in week 3. I mean, it's just like, and I put in our little thing here. We could segue into some Big Ten talk, kind of bring it back closer to home and kind of the who is and who isn't. But I think we're starting to get a good feel, I think, right now of who's legitimate and who's not. And there's not a lot of legitimacy here, to be honest with you. I think you got Ohio State. Got a big game Friday night. How about Fox goes to this Friday night package?
Mm-hmm.
They get a ranked game in week 1 with Arizona, Kansas State. And now out of nowhere, neither of these teams ranked in the preseason, Illinois and Nebraska, both get to 3-0 with impressive wins. And they're both in the top 25 and get another ranked game this Friday night with Illinois at Nebraska. Is Bielema the answer at Illinois? This is kind of a program. They already had one program win at home already over Kansas, which was big. But this one, if they're able to go on the road and win at Nebraska, when Nebraska seems to have their stuff together, that would be huge for Bielema and his legitimacy at Illinois. In Rule, the long journey through the desert, 20-some years for Nebraska, is it finally coming to an end? If they can get to 4-0, you would think they've got a pretty good chance of finally making it to a bowl game for the first time in 8 years. So that's one to really hone in on. Ohio State will play Nebraska later on. They don't play Illinois. So, it's like UCLA and Indiana. Ohio State doesn't play either of those teams. And it's like, would I really want to sit there and watch the tediousness of that for 3.5 hours? No, I don't think I want to. But this one might look in just to see if Raiola is going to ride the enthusiasm of the home crowd to a win over Illinois. That'll be a lot of fun, I think.
I'm actually semi-stoked for this one. I think this is going to be an interesting affair, although Nebraska's got the potential, especially it's a home game. I would be a little bit more intrigued in Champaign for this one, that Nebraska may be too much for them. But Illinois' got the nice win against Kansas, and then you can't even discount the other 2 wins for Illinois, even though the opponents were nothing. They usually struggle against the MAC schools and the FAUs of 2 or 3 years ago. They needed a 4th down to beat Toledo a couple of years ago. So at least they stomped a few teams non-conference.
Yeah, Nebraska favored by 8 in this game, and the over-under is like 43. So they're saying like 23-17, something like that. I don't know. My math's not good. 23-15, I don't know. Something.
With back when Terrell Pryor was a true freshman at Ohio State back in 2008, I don't know if it was Jim Tressel or Dick Tressel, or if there was just somebody talking about how a true freshman is going to lose you. A true freshman starting quarterback is going to lose you a game that you shouldn't lose at some point in the season.
No doubt.
And this might be one of those. Everybody's going to be watching. Everybody's going to be locked in. And Brett Bielema, to me, is one of the best coaches in the country. And, Arkansas didn't work out for him, but the Big Ten, you have to take Illinois seriously. They almost beat Michigan, last year? He's going to have his guys ready. They're going to be sound. They're going to be disciplined. And as long as Luke Altmaier doesn't turn the ball over, I figure whichever quarterback turns the ball over most in this one, that team's going to lose. And so you have to be careful. But Dylan Raiola, to this point, I don't think he's thrown an interception. He's been pretty careful. He's been good. So I'm definitely looking forward to that one. And then, Nebraska wins this, are going to be 6-0 heading to Indiana. And shoot, that may be a game between ranked opponents at this point too. And I think everybody's seeing what I saw at Big Ten Media Days with Kirk Cignetti. That dude's pretty awesome. He's hilarious. He's got a lot of attitude, and now he's showing it out on the football field for the Hoosiers. I don't know how long it's going to last because, as Maurice Claret once said, it's a humbling thing being humbled. And somebody's going to come along at some point and probably humble the Hoosiers, and maybe he might turn it down.
My text chain's been lightened up with, I can't wait for somebody to take this guy down a notch, already.
But like when
his day's coming.
he did the Jim Tressel 310 days thing at Indiana, saying, at halftime of mid-court, talking about all this stuff, and then he closes by saying, and Purdue sucks, and then he says, and Ohio State and Michigan suck too. And it's like, okay, this is good. This is what we like to see in the Big Ten. Some
like
attitude. Yeah. And then you talk to him at Big Ten Media Days, and you're like, I really like this guy.
Yeah. And that turned out to be a more truthful statement. 2 out of 3 ain't bad than we thought at the time.
Yeah. We went 1-1 in the Pacific Northwest rivalry games. Oregon, after 2, so-so showings against Idaho and Boise State, boy, oh boy, oh boy. I would have thought that they figured, well, we're Oregon. We'll just throw our designer helmets and uniforms out on the field and beat Oregon State. No. They showed up in full body and spirit and beat Oregon State's ass with a board. I mean, it was thorough and absolute. I mean, it was, and that place was electric too. Those people at Oregon State were ready and stoked, and it was all Oregon. And that's the Oregon we were promised. That was the Oregon that we are looking forward to seeing in the Big Ten, and that's the Oregon that can give Ohio State a tough game. So we'll see. Washington, they played about like I thought they would. In fact, I picked Washington State to win that game just based off what I had seen. I just wasn't impressed at all with Washington's first 2 games, and they get turned away at the 1-yard line with a minute to go, down 5, had to score a touchdown and couldn't do it. And Washington State, which has a pretty good football program, beat them. So there's one good, one bad for the Big Ten. But I think it's good to see that Oregon is legit. Now we'll see how they attack the rest of their games leading up to Ohio State.
If Ohio State doesn't pull through, could the 2 best teams in the conference be 2 new entries into the conference?
Wow. And here's the other thing. USC doesn't play Oregon or Ohio State. So if USC goes 9-0 and the Oregon Ohio State loser is 8-1 and the Oregon Ohio State winner is 9-0, the Oregon Ohio State loser is not in the Big Ten championship game. So that was something we pointed out, a month ago, an anomaly in the schedule. Like, perish the thought that USC is going to go 9-0. Well, I don't know. I mean, they win this one this week at Michigan. I'm sure they got some more tough ones somewhere, but what is it?
They're better than everybody else on the schedule, aside from possibly Penn State coming to town. But I just think that schedule's I just think the repetition of physical team after physical team, Rutgers, Nebraska,
the travel. I mean,
somebody's going to pick them off, if not multiple teams.
Could be.
It is a very favorable schedule, but I think what you guys are telling the Buckeye fans listening is that they need to root for Michigan this week. And if you just want to throw your comments in the chat there to see for the fans, see if you agree with Steve and Mark saying go ahead and root for Michigan.
It would help the cause. USC. It would help the cause. Yeah.
See how that goes.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, before we send it home, we actually, of course, had the news conferences this week, and you guys got to hear from Will Howard, Ryan Day, and Chip Kelly. Tony, what stood out to you?
I think the thing that was expected is that Donovan Jackson will be back this week, which will now give them 5 upperclassmen on the offensive line, which I don't think you can overstate in terms of the importance of it. And now this will be Tagovailoa's 3rd start on the interior, and he's getting better. And you've got Seth McLaughlin, who has been just a stalwart there for them. And you add Donovan Jackson into that mix, and you've got those 2 guys who are seniors, and Josh Fryer, a senior on the other end, and Josh Simmons, a 4th-year junior. That's a lot of experience in there to just continue to develop and move this running game and to advance the offense the way that Chip Kelly wants it to go and the way Ryan Day wants it to go. So I'm just interested to see what they add to it this week. And and what they can do off of it. But I think they're pretty healthy right now, and they just want to continue to build and be explosive and get out to a fast start, and then put some backups in. Not that they're going to say that, but they want to continue to build this depth but also I think mostly they just want to pick up where they left off after a week off, and that's been a lot of the focus. Last week was improvement week. This week I think it's just ramp up week, and get ready to pick up right back where you left off. 56-0 last week, 63-0 this week, something like that. That's not what I'm saying. That's kind of the messaging going out that let's get it going. We don't want to start slow again like they did in the season opener.
Yeah, they want to jump on Marshall early and often because, as we said, Marshall competitive with Virginia Tech 2 weeks ago, and they have the athletes and they have the big athletes on defense to kind of slow you down just a little bit. We'll see. If Ohio State can establish the run and get to 175 yards rushing, then they should win this game easily. Some things that I took from the press conference, Ryan Day talked about Lorenzo Styles Jr. perhaps earning more time on defense. So we'll see if that manifests itself. He's now wearing number 3 because he's on some special teams with Jeremiah Smith, I guess, who wears number 4. So I think you can look for Styles, I think, wearing number 3 now, potentially playing a little bit more. Austin Siereveld did a bang-up job in week 2 in place of Donovan Jackson at left guard. And Coach Day said they're still going to look for opportunities to get him into games. So that's something to watch. He could be that 6th offensive lineman in some sets. What else did Ryan Day really get into? Just noted how much respect he has for Marshall and that he's known Charlie Huff, obviously a former assistant at Alabama and Penn State, got a winning record in 4 years at Marshall. And they were picked this year to be 2nd in their division in the Sun Belt Conference after some lean years. So, we'll see how their season goes on from there. Chip Kelly, this guy, you just sit down, you listen to him, and you're like, man, everything is just Jim Dandy wonderful. I mean, happy with Quinshon Judkins, happy with Travion Henderson. Donovan Jackson coming in to play alongside Seth McLaughlin is the greatest thing that is ever going to happen to offensive line football, according to him, and I'm being a little bit exaggerative here, but I just think that they're excited about it. They are pumped up about, that this offense can hit another level. And so Will Howard, there was a ton of Will Howard talk about how he has gotten him in and out of bad plays and how they've run so many RPOs and he's making the right decisions and making the right reads. And he truly is the run game coordinator and feeding the ball to the running backs in situations where they can flourish and, pulling it out when he felt he needed to and, different things like that. So just everything coming out yesterday to me was very positive. There hasn't been a lot of adversity yet for this team, no serious injuries. And yet, it's coming at some point. There's going to be a setback of some sort that just not necessarily a loss, but a deficiency, an injury, something is going to pop up that you're going to say, man, this is something they got to work through. But so far, it's smooth sailing for the good ship Buckeye. Through the first 3 weeks of the season in 2 games. And it sounds like they came through the bye week pretty good and are ready to go against Marshall.
And Dave was asked about watching football last week, and did he? And he's like, yeah, he watched it with his family. Game started at noon, and he's talking out loud about what he would do in every situation and second guessing and first guessing and basically just being one of us watching football, but also from his coaching experience, playing through all of this in his mind and how he would progress through that. So I thought that was interesting that, you get the human aspect of coaches watching football and, being driven crazy by that as well. But then also being asked about Tyler Van Dyke going down, Quinn Ewers going down. Does that give you any pause for your team? And he's like, we've been working on quarterback depth. You saw that, they played 4 quarterbacks last week. They're trying to be prepared for anything because, they've been saying since January, the first time we talked to them about this year, like they're going to need more than one quarterback. So you've got to have more than one quarterback ready. And that's what they're trying to do. but it's hard you can't simulate games in practice for quarterbacks because they don't get hit. So the only experience they get getting hit is in games, and you never know truly how they're going to do until they are getting hit. But overall, they're going to continue to try to build that depth. And I asked Chip Kelly, since last week was improvement week, what did they work on? What did he work on with Will Howard? And he talked about spending time on footwork, technique, and play action. And I think you kind of saw that with the underthrow to Jeremiah Smith. That would have been a touchdown, but the deep shot that was underthrown and incomplete. But also just pre-snap recognition, post-snap decisions. But overall, the decision-making with the RPOs and the reads and the run game have been really, really good. Continues to, I assume, to grade out a champion and is making the correct decisions. And I think, as Chip said and everybody said, like, you don't truly know if the decision was right or wrong. You know more that they're wrong, because we can see something and think it's an RPO, but it could just be a straight handoff. Like last year and like last year with Kyle McCord, the 2 years with CJ Stroud, people are like, why does he never pull the ball back? Look how much room he has to run. Why does he always just hand it off? And it's like, because those are just handoffs. Those are just straight run plays. They're not reads. He's not reading anybody. He's just giving the ball away. And so a lot of these reads, if it goes well, it just looks like that's the play that was designed, rather than Will Howard is making that decision in that moment. But when a play goes poorly, you're like, oh, he shouldn't have done that. And so, the second guessing on the bad stuff has been limited because the bad stuff has been limited, and he's making the right plays, and you're seeing the results as, Jeremiah Smith catches a 7-yard curl and takes it another 63 yards for a touchdown, or Carnell Tate catches an 8-yard curl and takes it another 26 yards for a touchdown. These are just simple read decisions on some RPO stuff or some play action, things like that. And you just get the ball into the playmaker's hands and you let him go do that. And he's been excelling at that.
We've run through some of the point spreads, folks, for this week. Steve gave his recommendations on Oklahoma, Tennessee, and USC and Michigan. And we also have our premium tier at both Patreon and at YouTube. College football is even more exciting with some action on the line. And the games are even better when you're cashing in. And the Voice of College Football is the place to be to get the greatest value. Let's start with my picks. 75% against the money line, 58% against the spread. I've got a 40-year track record. In fact, in 2023, at $100 played per game, you would have netted over $9,300. And guess what? I'm just the warm-up act. Steve Merrill, our ace in the hole, show stopper from Wager Talk. 6 years with the Voice of College Football, over 30 years in the industry. Steve gives us analysis on all the big games, but you can't miss Steve's weekly under-the-radar pick, which went 21-5 against the spread the last 2 seasons. I repeat, 21-5 against the spread. You also get picks from some of our top analysts here at the Voice of College Football, including Steve Dace and Matt Zemek. Become a YouTube channel member or Patreon member for just $99 per month. Go to the main channel on YouTube, click join, and select the betting tier. Do the same thing on Patreon. Make 2024 a winner now. Eric, guy Steve Merrill, he did miss his under the radar this week. First time in a long time. 23-6. He went with Duke covering against UConn. I think the spread was 16. They won by 6. So he missed it this week. 23-6 against the spread. It still is decent. All right, Tony, what's going on at
Well, I just wanted to mention the most blatant example of tampering I've ever seen. If you guys saw the Charles Huff comments yesterday about how he'd love to have some Ohio State players transfer into Marshall, and he touted their Tudor's Biscuit World NIL program that provides all the free biscuits that you can possibly eat. I think it's egregious. Not since Kirk Ferentz went and tampered to land Cade McNamara have I seen anything so offensive and egregious. And I can't wait to ask Ryan Day about it tonight. And if he's already talked to the NCAA, are there legal charges that can be pressed? Like how many attorneys can we get involved in this? Because I am sickened by it.
Everyone knows Can't make biscuits like they do at Marshall. That is the biscuit making capital of the world. So you get your best biscuits there, I guess.
Mark, we have Bob Evans in Columbus. All right. So don't tell me, don't start touting other
I don't want
biscuits
to
and
hear
other
about your
places.
biscuits.
You don't have to sell me on a good Bob Evans breakfast. No, sir. I've had enough of those in my life.
Do you know what's great is where I live between Columbus and Newark on the east side, they put a freeway in and they landlocked a Bob Evans. It used to be you could get right off the road and go to the Bob Evans. Well, now you got to go up a half mile to the exit and drive back down the service road to get to the Bob Evans. So it's kind of like a mob Bob Evans, like it's there for money laundering or something. I don't know, because no one's ever there. But I love it because it's like 8 minutes from my house, and I can go in there once a month and get my Bob Evans fix, and I'm in and out in 36 minutes. I mean, it's like boom, boom, boom. I mean, here's your biscuits, here's your salad, here's your entree, here's your check. Goodbye. Here's your thing of strawberry pie, out the door. So there you go. Here's
your
when it's
gabagool.
cold. Is there anything better when it's cold than that bowl with the chicken and noodles and the mashed potatoes? Oh my gosh, like you died and gone to heaven.
That reminds me of when the McDonald's across the street from ESPN was just basically funded by ESPN. And then suddenly there was a bad accident, their main drag there at ESPN, where 2 cars actually went off the road and into the ESPN parking lot. My car was only parked like 2 rows away from they just demolished like 7 cars in the ESPN parking lot. Wasn't a few weeks that boom, the steel fencing was coming in and completely surrounded campus. We're going to let that happen again. So ESPN was good for some things like that. But suddenly, boom, within a month or so, that McDonald's shut down because it became a problem like the Bob Evans. Couldn't just walk out the door and go straight across the street to McDonald's. You had to get in your car and walk around. Yeah. Shut down. See ya. Only one of those I've ever seen shut down.
Yeah.
Buckeye Huddle. What's going on there, Tony?
Yeah, today just threw up a notebook from what we heard yesterday, and also a story on the tight ends and playing with a bunch of tight ends and what that does, how that limits the passing game. But as Chip Kelly said, hey, I saw Bennett Christian go 55 yards for a touchdown in a 3 tight end set. So does it, how does it really limit the passing game? So you can find that, and then have another episode of Buckeye Weekly dropping after tonight's interviews, and we recap what we learned and take questions from the live stream viewers.
Steve, what's going on with you this week?
Well, I'm actually going to be working today on my game data page where I'll have some more thoughts about Ohio State and Marshall. I have my picks. I'm also off to a red hot start. I'm like 15 games over 500 picking against the spread, which last year I was miserable. I ended up about 20 or 30 games under for the year. So for me, after 3 weeks to be 15 or 20 games above, I am, and I'm picking, let's see, close to 25 or 30 games a week. So I've done, I'm not making any money. I'll just say that, but maybe I'm not approaching it the right way. But on the whole, I have a lot of good picks so far. So in Big Ten, I am like on fire. Like I picked North Carolina to beat Minnesota, and I picked Washington State to beat Washington. So Big Ten, I've only lost 3 games straight up in Big Ten. So, and then doing really, really well against the spread in Big Ten. So my picks will be out tomorrow on bucknuts.com for this great week of college football that's coming up. And, look, coming to this show each week, I just in spending the hour talking with everybody here and reading the comments and everything, Ohio State hasn't played in 11 days. I'm ready for this. I'm ready for Saturday. I'm sitting here and I am just shaking. I am ready for noon on Saturday. So here we go.
Well, Steve, if you keep it up, we're going to recruit you to make some picks for us My goodness, 15 over. But I got to say,
Let me
if you
keep
ever
working
need it,
my systems and let me make sure. I don't
all
want to
right,
put my
yeah, I want
name
to
out
make
there
sure
just
too,
yet.
because I'm the other direction. I got a pretty good track record forever, but this year, I don't want to say my record right now. I'm about 8 games under 500, which I got a
I
lot of
don't
work to do.
spend a lot of time looking at stats and all this other stuff. I'm comparing scores. I'm comparing what I believe the quality of the teams are. What's the
Well,
rationale for each team? I think that you have to build that in. And is this a team that when it gets down 10 points, do they pack it in or do they play to the end? And there are some teams that will pack it in. And there are some teams that will play to the end. And then you have teams like Florida and Texas A&M and some other ones that are just always underachieve, and you just they're spread favorite teams that never live up to the hype. And so I had Miami in that group, but Miami looks legitimate, so somewhat. So we'll see as they get into ACC how that goes.
our buddy Phil Steele has a category on that, doesn't he? Regards to which teams have defeated the spread or been the worst or the best against the spread over a certain period of time.
I'm sure he does. Yeah.
Okay.
He's got everything. And, I don't subscribe to his weekly service. I guess if I was a professional gambler, I probably might, just because he seems to have all the stats and the trends and even in his book, which is crazy, the book, the Bible, he has every game for each team listed. And then out to the side, he tells you in a quick snapshot, any kind of a trend recently or all time, if one team's dominated the other. And then he'll even go so far as to say, well, in the last 5 games, they're 4-1 straight up, but 1-4 against the spread against this team. So that you kind of have to take that into account a lot of times when you see a rivalry that has been colored one way or the other against the spread. One team has dominated on the scoreboard by winning by 3, 7, 8 points, but they haven't covered the spread against this team. And that, believe it or not, even in a new year, even with a new team, sometimes you have to take that into account, that one team will play this other team extremely hard. And there's no rhyme or reason for it.
I think that over time, a lot of these trends are just fun to look at, but they are pretty meaningless because you're talking different coaches, different players, entirely different programs. Ohio State's the same program today as it was 10 years ago, but shoot, Stanford's not the same program today as it was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So I would say that Ohio State against the spread the last 10 years, 67-60. What's that tell us? I don't think it tells us much.
To be one of the dominant teams. It says like this week they've set a spread that is extremely difficult to cover. I mean, that some of these 30, 40, 50-point lines that they've had to endure, those are hard to cover. One quick thought. Anybody have a feeling about Kentucky and Georgia? Kentucky got blown out last week by South Carolina at home, and then Georgia has to, vent their spleen to pull out the win. And the coaches kept Georgia number 1. The AP moved Texas to number 1. I had Georgia clear down at number 5 in my ballot. I don't know. What did everybody kind of take from that? Is Georgia legitimate?
I think they're mortal, but they also have had these kinds of games against Kentucky over the years. So that part is what it is.
A couple years ago.
But like even against Kentucky, they've had some close games for whatever reason. But I think this just shows something that I was told before the season, that when I was asking somebody, an NFL personnel guy, to compare the Ohio State offense versus the Georgia offense and defense versus defense. And he said, basically Ohio State has them in both spots, except for the quarterback. Like Ohio State has more offensive talent, more defensive talent. And I don't think Georgia has a bunch of playmakers right now. So, but sometimes they're going to look awfully good. And then sometimes, you're not going to look great in the SEC every single week. So, and plus, as I heard from some people, it was raining.
Oh, yeah.
It rained on Georgia when they had the ball, and then it stopped, and then it started raining again.
Wow.
Yeah, they got whipped up front on both sides of the ball, and I think that's what's alarming, concerning to some degree,
Mhm.
rather than it wasn't well, there were some freak fumbles, some dumb miscues, that sort of thing, miscommunication. Carson Beck throws it out of nowhere, and Kentucky dude, a la Larry Brown in the Super Bowl, is just standing there, interception.
Mm.
No, they got whipped up front. So I got to see it again and again. But Georgia's one of the best teams in the country. But yeah, human, as Tony says, definitely human. All right, folks, appreciate you being here. The Voice of College Football. There are more people here, or at least there was about a minute ago, than there was the entire show. So what that means is just check out what you missed, because you probably checked in 15, 20 minutes late. So just rewind, watch the rest. And then, of course, check out Tony at BuckeyeHuddle.com, Buckeye Weekly as well, the podcast, Steve at Bucknuts247 Sports. We'll be back probably next Wednesday to highlight and preview the Michigan State game in the Big Ten season. See you then.